Let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a concept that literally touches absolutely every part of our lives, yet, we rarely ever step back to actually see it. We are exploring the profound architecture of separation. Usually, we think of separation as a strict ending, right? A breakup, physical distance, a tragic loss. But what if, actually scratch that, what if it's actually a beginning? What if distance is the fundamental building block of our society, our minds, our humanity, and even our spirituality? We're going to look at this idea across 4 completely different dimensions, drawing on some truly fascinating source material to see how the lines that divide us, well, they actually define us.
So here's our agenda for today's Zoom Out journey. 1. A domestic and social fracture. 2. The dignity of distance. 3. The anthropological machine. 4. The pain of spiritual parting. And finally, 5. Union and the return. Let's get into it.
Section 1. A domestic and social fracture. We're beginning our zoom out with Asghar Farhadi's incredible Oscar-winning film, A Separation. It starts with a middle-class couple in Tehran. Simin wants to leave Iran for a better future, but her husband Nader outright refuses to go because he has to care for his father, who's suffering from Alzheimer's. So Simin moves out, and man, a massive chain reaction begins. Nader hires Razia, a devout woman from a poor suburb, to watch his dad. Overwhelmed, pregnant, and commuting 90 minutes each way, Razia is really struggling. One day, Nader comes home to find his father unconscious and tied to a bed, and Razia is just nowhere to be found. Furious, Nader fires her and physically pushes her out of the apartment. She falls, suffers a miscarriage, and then her heavily indebted husband sues Nader for murder. It is just this crazy, cascading avalanche of conflict.
And this brilliantly illustrates a core takeaway, perfectly summarized by film critic Mainak Misra. Each character in the film is right, but at the same point of time is wrong based on the situation. Farhadi gives us complete moral ambiguity here. Think about it. Nader is protecting a helpless parent. Razia is just trying to survive crushing poverty. Simin is fighting tooth and nail for her daughter's future. The separation here isn't just a divorce. It's a profound divide between social classes and personal truths, where everyone's unique reality makes them both victim and villain. The sheer paralysis of the whole situation comes from the fact that, well, literally everyone is justified.
So this brings us to a crucial question. In the film, separation looks like a tragic breakdown of our relationship and a society. But is that all it is? Or, as we zoom out, could separation actually be the very foundation of our personal psychology? Section 2. The dignity of distance. To explore this, we're turning to existential psychotherapist Manu Bazzano. He offers this really sharp critique of our modern obsession with empathy and total unity. You've probably heard of the 6 degrees of separation, right? That cheerful idea that we're all interconnected? Well, Bazzano introduces the 7th degree of separation. This is the stark reality that no matter how close we get to someone, there is always going to be an unbridgeable gap between us. And frankly, that's a good thing. We aren't mind readers, and we definitely shouldn't try to be. This 7th degree preserves a person's autonomy and dignity. It acknowledges that the other person is and always will be a mystery that we just cannot fully possess or fix. This completely shifts the traditional therapeutic paradigm. Usually, therapy makes the relationship the ultimate goal, striving for emerging and complete empathic understanding, where the therapist tries to see the exact same world the client does. But Bazzano argues this actually risks becoming a subtle form of hubris, quietly erasing the client's uniqueness. The existential goal is the exact opposite, to maintain separation. It's this wild paradox that by honoring someone's existential aloneness, their absolute inalienable difference from you, you're actually providing the safest, most ethical space for them to heal themselves. True connection requires boundaries. So, distance gives us our psychological dignity. But let's zoom out a third time. What if separation doesn't just define our interpersonal relationships, but the very biological and philosophical concept of humanity itself?
Section 3. The anthropological machine.
To answer that, we turn to philosopher Giorgio Agamben. He proposes a really radical theory. The concept of the human is entirely artificially manufactured by what he calls the anthropological machine. So the crucial point is that, according to Agamben, there's no inherent biological essence of being human. Instead, human life is this ongoing, exhausting process of internal separation. We don't just wake up human. We take our raw animalistic urges and we actively push them down, bracketing them off. Being human isn't a natural state of being. It's a continuous, active severing of ourselves from our own inner animal.
Agamben outlines how this machine operates through 2 historical variants. Now keep in mind, we're neutrally exploring his philosophical framework here. First, the modern machine functions by internal exclusion. It takes people who are biologically human and politically expels them from the category of humanity, creating an inhuman other from within. He points to the horrific treatment of Jewish people in Europe as the prime historical example of this. Conversely, the ancient machine functioned by external inclusion. It took outsiders and categorized them as animals in human form, which historically justified the existence of slaves or barbarians. In both tragic cases, the concept of the human only exists by violently separating itself from something it defines as not human.
We've seen how separation builds our societies, our psychological health, and even our philosophical definition of humanity. Now, for our final zoom out. If separation is the fundamental mechanism of our reality, how do we ever cross the final divide? How do we bridge the gap between the human and the divine?
Section 4. The pain of spiritual parting.
We find our final answer in Sufi mysticism, particularly through the great poet Rumi, as analyzed in Shibli Nomani's classic work. Nomani repositioned Rumi not just as a mystic, but as a brilliant theologian. And Sufism absolutely flips our entire understanding of separation on its head. Now, what's really interesting here is how, in this literature, the ultimate goal is passionate union with the divine. The separation we feel in our daily worldly life is seen as an agonizing illusion. However, it is an absolutely necessary illusion. We are separated from the divine source so that we can go on a journey to discover our own individual consciousness. You see, you have to become a unique self before you can consciously choose to offer that self back.
This process of returning is known as fana, which translates to annihilation. But don't worry, it's not destruction in a scary or negative sense. In deep meditation, the Sufi mystic drowns their mind in their heart. They sacrifice their temporal, egotistic self, the part of you that worries about your job, your status, your ego, on the altar of love. It's the extinction of individual will to achieve a mystic conjunction, a higher state of being, where the division between humanity and the divine is temporarily dissolved.
Section 5. Union and the Return.
But here is where Sufi philosophy becomes incredibly profound. The journey doesn't stop at annihilation. Let's move to Baqa and see how this builds into the concept of Baqa, or substance. According to scholars like William Chittick, substance is the affirmation of self that absolutely must follow the negation of self. Once the mystic achieves union, they don't just float there forever. They have to return to the temporal world, stepping right back into the pain of separation, but now forever connected to the divine reality.
This brings us to an incredibly beautiful Sufi paradox. I want union, and he wants separation. Therefore, I surrender to separation so that his wish comes true. The mystic longs for union, for sure, but realizes that the divine actually intends for the world of separation to exist. Why? Because only by being separate can an individual actually step back and witness the beauty of the beloved. Only by being separate can you praise, serve, and fulfill the very purpose of creation. The mystic willingly embraces the sheer pain of distance, because submitting to it is the ultimate act of love.
Okay, let's quickly review the massive ground we've covered today. We started with the social level, seeing through Farhadi's cinema how domestic conflict and class divides completely fracture our reality. Then we moved to the psychological level, learning from Bassanio that preserving distance is absolutely essential for human dignity and autonomy. After that, we explored the ontological level with Agamben, seeing how humanity itself is manufactured by severing ourselves from animality. And finally, we reached the spiritual level, where Sufi mystics like Rumi teach us that we must annihilate the ego to find the divine, only to return to separation in order to serve.
Separation isn't just an ending. It is the architecture of everything we know. The divides in our society, the boundaries in our relationships, the definition of our species, and the yearning of our souls, they all rely on distance. So I want to leave you with this to think about. In what ways are the separations in your own life, the distances you're currently mourning or maybe even fighting against, quietly building the foundation of your truest self? I highly encourage you to seek out these sources, dive deeper into these philosophies, and explore how distance might just be the most powerful connection we actually have. Thank you so much for focusing in and learning with me today.